you. Arya Pawar, on behalf of Law Shastra, welcome you all to today's webinar on corporate governance by Mr. Saurabh Raman sir. He has completed his LLB from RMNLU and he has done his LLM from NALSA Hyderabad in corporate and commercial laws. Presently, he is an associate at Vadya Gandhi Law Firm at Mumbai and he is handling matters of general corporate, private equity, merger amalgamations and venture capital. We are pleased to have you here with us, sir, and I thank you in advance for sharing your time and knowledge with us. So before we start the session, I request all of you to please switch your audios and videos off and do not share your screen, and also the attendance will be marked by the organizers. So I request you to please not drop your messages in the chat box below. Also, thank you so much. Handing over to you, sir.
To do uh, uh, am I audible to everyone? Is it fine, Ria?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, great. So before I start, thanks a lot for inviting me, and also thanks to the all participants to taking their time out of their own busy schedule and joining this webinar. In fact, these are the unprecedented time, and this COVID-19 has made everything to restructure in its own manner, and so is companies in this present time, and also the corporate governance. So I'll start. I just want to first share the screen. Okay. Is this the PPT visible to all of you? Ria, can you confirm, please?
No, sir, it's not visible right now.
Okay.
Yes, it is visible. Yeah, I can see it's in corporate governance.
Okay, yes, it's visible.
Okay. Thank you. I'll start then. Okay. Now, before we begin, I mean, what is the whole basic of this whole corporate governance is? We need to understand that the corporate governance takes its roots from the business. The whole model is reversed around the business. Now, at all point of time, therefore, one school of law believes that the business should be the focal point, and then all these matrix of corporate governance and governance norm and the company law should be looked into. Now, the moment you see a business, now if you before we directly jump into the company law and the corporate governance part, we need to understand that how a business is operated, right? Now, if you see the small shops in your nearby houses and in your gullies and mohallas, right? Those are sole proprietorship, right? Where the business and the person who is running the business are in fact both are same, right? Now, why I'm saying they're same because uh, there's a one shop where the sole proprietor is basically running the shop. He's the person who is maintaining the supply chain. He's the person who is working on the cash counter. He's the one who is he may hire a helper, but he's the one who is exchanging goods, and over the counter he's taking the money and giving things out, right? So you see that in these scenarios of a sole proprietorship of small businesses and small shops, I mean to say, in those cases, the business and the person are the same, right? Now, as we grow, I mean, we go into a little advanced structure, we see partnerships, right? When we see that, the company, the same business which was run by sole proprietor is growing now, and then we see a whole partnership a bit coming into picture. Now, if I'm presuming that you'll be knowing that what is the history of a company in the jurisprudence of law or in jurisprudence of commercial market and mercantile market has come into it. It started from individuals running their businesses, and then it went to a partnership firm, then it went to a limited liability, and then a company. How in England it developed, right? Now, similarly in India also, especially in our example, a business, the moment it gets a little advanced, gets a little bigger, a partnership comes into picture. Now, then depending upon the people who are running the show, running the business, they may also choose to start a company, right? And therefore, one of the way of incorporating a company is a private limited company, where there is a small group of people In fact, generally we see there on maximum there are 6 or 5 or 7 people who are members of private limited company, and there are small people number of people who are running the business. Now here we see that the same example where in the sole proprietor where the business and the person who is running the business are in fact uniform or same. In the private limited company it gets a little diverse, and then we see that business and the management, the people who are running the business, the shareholders who are owning the business, they both are get little distinct, but still they are still intact, because at this point of time also the group of people are very close and very small. And then we move towards public company. Now public company is where where they at least while in private company you need at least 2 members. In private companies I think you need 6 or 8 members. So the number of people who are owning the company goes a little bigger. The business generally which comes in the public companies are also a little bigger. There the moment we see in public company, the companies are allowed to take monies from the public also, and they can very well use uh, the different resources and different methods which companies act provides to get money out of the public. As you know that primarily any company, any entity requires capital to run. This is most fundamental thing, and capital can either be taken by a bank as a matter of loan, or by individual as a matter of loan, or they can be taken by individuals in exchange of equity, like ownership of the company. Now we see public companies where it gets a little more advanced, and then the extreme end of this bargain is a listed company where we see that public at large very well an IPO comes of a company, and the public at large can subscribe to the shares, and they can very well take their shares and take the ownership in the company. Now, we see that as the business model and the business grows bigger and bigger, more and more people are coming into picture. In a sole proprietorship, the owner and the business are seen. In private limited company, the people who are running the business are more than the sole proprietor, and therefore it will advance. In public company, it gets more advanced, and in listed company, it gets at the most advanced stage. Now, then we see that what is the whole corporate governance principally fundamentally goal is. What is the goal? The goal is that as you grow in the structure, in the whole structure, where you get more advanced and more people are coming into of running the company and getting affected by the company, then in such a case corporate governance norms are basically a method, a way to, and which lays down a fundamental principle and norms that how a company can be governed. And therefore the whole idea is to manage the everyone's goals, right? We'll try to understand that who all these everyone's are, but at this point of time it's very important to understand that the what is the underlying principle to the uh, to corporate governance is. The underlying principle is that they want to manage the goals. In other way, you can also say they want to avoid the conflict or mitigate the conflict. Why? Because as the company goes big, the more and more people are getting affected directly or indirectly by the company. Now we'll see what are the examples of these everyone people are. Yeah. Now, why is it important? As I told you that it's important because you have to manage the goals, you have to avoid the conflict, you have to mitigate the conflict. Now, therefore, corporate governance norms are important so that there can be a risk mitigation and compliance. Now, the moment I say risk mitigation, what do I mean? I mean that whenever there's a conflict scenario between two people in the company, two group of people in the company, in such a case, there will be a deadlock, and therefore the company is exposed to this. The business is exposed to this, and therefore the governance norms are important so that this risk can be mitigated. Now, it's also important because the compliances. Now, why these compliances can be are important? So the basic idea of this compliance under the Companies Act in the SEBI is, or the whole mercantile law, commercial laws is that firstly you have to take care of the market, right? The market which is for under which you are operating, the whole industrial sector which you are operating, you need to keep on catering their needs. Therefore, compliances are one way of disclosing the information about the company. Now, it's very important to understand that the moment you are disclosing anywhere about the company, there is a chance that you might also end up divulging such information which are very important for the company's business, right? There's certain, what called insider information or something critical or crucial important, business significant important information, right? Now, if we go ahead and divulge that, the competitors might use them and take a leverage against us. Therefore, it's very important that compliance needs to be balanced, that information needs to be given out to the sector. Can is a bigger rainbow umbrella term, which can include investors, which can include other components of the business that we'll see later. But yeah, I mean, the whole idea is to balance that. You divulge information for their benefit, but at the same time, you also take care of the business need. Because as I told you earlier at the beginning, that company, corporate governance, all these terms which keep on listening about on the company law and the company law and the mercantile law, commercial law matters, the focal point should always be business. Business is the most important thing. And why? Because business is what is the object of a company. If you see a memorandum of exchange of a company, now if it's, I want to go through it, be it Tata's or Reliance or Jio or anyone, we will see that there is a huge time spent on the object of the company. There's an object clause in the memorandum of association, and the objects are put in there, and the company is being incorporated by at that time the people who are want to run that company. For them, the object is the most important. Therefore, my view is that business should always be the focal length. Now, second point is the internal control. Now, we have seen that example like Satyam in 2002, I guess, or recently in the ICSI, when Ms. Chanda Kochar was involved and she had to be sacked from her position. We also saw the Kingfisher Airlines case where I think the UB Spirit matter, where I think Vijay Mallya is still running, is a fugitive right now. Very recently, it happened in ILFNS case and lots of other cases where the NPAs were the problem. So on those scenarios, in these specific cases, we saw that all these corporate governance norms and corporate governance debate started, and there was a huge advocacy for people who are in the business or outside the business, being as a sector in the sector as an investor, or just a person who is watching the things from the boundary. They see that there is a clear lack of governance. Thirdly, is it's important to enhance shareholder value. Now we see that companies like SDFC, Tata Group, and also I think Kotak, all these companies have a good repute in the market. Now, whenever a company's share is being sold, right, or an IPO comes, now if you read that document of the IPO, you will see that there is always a face value attached to the share, which will be generally 10 rupees or 20 rupees, and rest of the price will be premium. So right now, if the SDFC Bank shares being traded as 1,000 rupees, then you will see that the face value is 20 rupees and the whole 980 rupees is the premium attached to it, right? Now, this premium is basically measured by a set of principle, which is again a different method of of valuing the company, and for that a valuer is appointed, etc., etc. But if a company has a good corporate governance norms, then we have seen in the market that a person who want to buy the share or wants to subscribe to the shares of this company is ready to pay premium also. He is ready to pay extra for that. That is very important, and that's important. Why then? Because then in the sector, in the market, in the companies, it gives them incentive to use the corporate governance norms and standard the corporate governance norms internally in the company. Now it is also gives you a better image in the slowdown. Now, at the moment, if you have a well-running business and have a structured business inside and having and completing all your governance norms, then whenever market collapses, like it just happened in the COVID scenario, or maybe like 2008 made the whole slowdown. In such scenarios, the company is having a good fundamental based on based on good norms and governance norms. The investors are always show faith. Even if they see that the prices of the shares are tanking, the company is not running well, scenarios of slowdowns, the investors still shows a faith. Why? Because the companies having a good corporate governance norms always carry a good reputation. Now, it also improves the organizational efficiencies in a business. As I told you, as it get advanced, has more many people, you'll have your internal management, you'll have a board of directors, you'll have your customers, you'll have lenders, you have employees, you'll have other stakeholders whom you are dealing with. Now, as the company grows, then there has to be internal governance norms so that the company can be managed. A very good example can be seen in a constitutional law when we see, when we read about Indian government and we see state government and we see, they are like panchayats and municipal corporations. So I mean, whenever a government is made or organization is made, there's always a huge time and money spent on the strengthening the organization, and the structure is very important so that the time is saved, and also everyone is aware that what is their specific role is, and at the same time it also ensures checks and balance, which I think is the fundamental objective of corporate governance, that there has to be check and balance. As the company grows, as more number of people are getting involved in the company, the more and more checks and balances are required. And very important, because you see what is happening in the past 2 years in the industry, in the market, especially with the e-commerce industry. What we've seen is a lots of mergers and acquisitions are happening. Lots of foreign MNCs are coming in, investing into Indian companies. Right now, a startup like, for example, a Paytm, right, or for example, Ola, right, or Oyo Rooms, right. These are the Byju's. These are the billion-dollar companies of this century, of past 3 to 4 years, right. Now, what is we have seen happening is, all these MNCs are coming and they are trying to acquire the Indian entities. Now, why is this important? Because they have, of course, deep pocket, they have a better technology, and it's always good for the business that these kind of inorganic growth keeps on happening. Now, when these MNCs come in and try to invest or acquire Indian entities, they always, give are ready to, pay premium, or I mean to say, they get attracted towards those companies who have a good, strong internal corporate governance norms, because all these MNCs do carry they have their repute, and they function from a more advanced commercially advanced countries, and therefore for them it's very easy to have a synergy with those Indian companies who have a better corporate governance norms. Now, going back to the first slide, if you remember this slide, right? Now, this slide talks about how a business is going bigger and bigger. At the same time, the structure underlying the business is also going bigger and bigger. Therefore, as you see that in initial first part, the sole proprietor, where the owner and the business, owners of the business and business itself is largely, it's a one entity. The same within company also, the shareholder is the person who owns the company, right? So in all the cases, whoever is owning the share is the shareholder of the company. Now, primarily a business duty is only to take care of their shareholder, right? Because if I run a business, right, and I have three partners, the whole object of the business is to maximize the profit for me, right, and my partners. And that is the whole sole objective of the company at the initial stage of sole proprietor, maybe you would say. But as the business grows bigger, as the underlying uh, entities or elements start interacting with the company grows in number, we see that the stakeholder concepts comes to picture. Now, what is stakeholder? So, in a very layman definition, a stakeholder is anyone who can be affected by the company directly or indirectly. Now, of course, I mean this is, I mean it's a very wide definition, but and you have to maybe draw some line somewhere. But we have seen from time to time by in the NCLT or also in the high courts, Bombay High Courts and Supreme Courts, that these lines have kept on increasing, right? Now this happens when is when the company is working on a very large scale, having a listed company, having lots of subsidiary in the companies like Tata Group, we see, or Birla's, or maybe for example Kotak Group, HDFC Group. They all have a lot of people they are engaging with on a daily basis. So these people can be apart from stakeholder. In the stakeholder definition, the shareholders will also, of course, will be there. Apart from that, the employees of the company will also be a stakeholder. The customer is also a stakeholder. A creator is also a stakeholder, and the environment in which the companies function, the environmental laws of the people or the vendors where they're taking their raw material, where they're also complying with the environment principle or not, the community guidelines or not, is very important, and the industry which they are functioning. So we see that the corporate governance, as the company grows bigger and bigger, is not only taking care of the needs of shareholder, it's also about taking care of the needs of the stakeholders. And therefore, as the moment we go jump into the pool of stakeholder, we see that they are different people, kind of people interacting with the company, and all have a different need from the company. And therefore, whenever there is a conflict, then situation goes south. And therefore, in those scenarios, if we have a better corporate governance, uh, then it's easy to mitigate those conflict situations. Now, what is important is that what are the sources of corporate governance, and why corporate governance are basically, what a company, suppose a company wants to adhere to a corporate governance norm, what do you need to do, right? And where do you want to look up to, right? So firstly is the regulatory norms. Of course, we have Companies Act governing the company, we have SEBI, we have RBI, and so on and so forth, which will deal in next slides. The other one is voluntary guidelines. The company can always have their own guidelines, uh, uh, which they can come up with like a bylaws, or maybe like a internal rule or guideline, which the company can adopt. And thirdly is the market forces. Now we'll try to dissect all these three one by one. So first is regulatory norms. Now the regulatory norms are primarily, for the moment we talk about a company, is of course Companies Act 2013 and the rules thereunder. Then as the company grows up and of dealing with corporate governance is the LODR of 2015 regulation. It was, I think, amended also in April, and also takeover code. Why takeover code? Because again, any big company having doing something which is a substantial takeover of each other, in such scenario, it does have an impact in the industry in which or the sector in which the company is functioning, and therefore takeover code is also important from the perspective of the corporate governance norms. Thirdly is regulators. We see that especially in the specific sector which the company is functioning, if the company is functioning under finance companies, then RBI comes into picture. If there's insurance, then IRD comes into picture. Environment laws, labor laws, of course, is applicable to all the companies. Therefore, the company's governance norms needs to also keep in mind these regulators in the specific laws also. Other one is standards like accounting standard and CS secretary compliances. These are also important because when the company has to make their accounts or their reports for their shareholder or the board, which are called annual reports, then and the financial statements are made also attached with the annual reports. Those also needs to follow a standard so that, I mean, these are all are basically tools, just to ensure that everyone is following. Because the moment, I mean, what we are talking about under this head is a codified laws, right? So codifications, the main objective always has been to make stability, give clear picture to the people who are following it. And therefore the standards are also important, because this standards also gives a very clarity and a kind of a in a codified manner, gives directions to all those people who are, have to prepare the financial statement or prepare annual report, and so on and so forth. The next is judicial pronouncements. Uh, uh, I mean, the pre-COVID era, in the past, like from 17 to 19, the NCLT, apart from IBC, NCLT also got lots of commercial matters coming in front of them because of insider trading or fraudulent cases, and therefore the judicial pronouncements have come to make sure that the corporate governance norms are if not followed in the company, the person who are responsible for it should not go unpunished. Next is market forces. As I explained to you, there is a premium over the price of our investor is ready to pay if the company has a good corporate governance. Why? Because the market and the company is always done on perception. Now tomorrow, when you go and buy a share of a company, you always have a perception that the company will grow, right? Now the perception can always be backed by two things. Firstly is the factual data. On data you rely upon and say, okay, the company is, I think, will grow. Sector itself is growing and the company will grow. And other thing you also keep in mind is to see that the repute and the company carries, the historically the company's how the company has dealt with this corporate governance cases. Like for example, recently in HDFC Bank, when they had their AMG, their annual general meeting 2 days back, they one small issue came up in the where under the HDFC Bank, a specific company, a special purpose vehicle, which was was engaged with giving loans for the cars and bikes. Some fraudulent and some misconduct came into light, right? And HDFC Bank did not even take thought for thought for even for a 1 minute before taking an action. They directly ordered for an inquiry. Now these kind of steps does boost the confidence of the investors in uh, towards the company. And therefore the market forces element is really important, because the investor expectations, the moment I say investor here, I'm talking about all those people who are the shareholders of the company, or who wants to invest in the company, or who wants to buy the shares and sell the shares of the company. They all are good repute, and therefore all other companies also wants to be quite under the good repute. Therefore, even if they don't want, because of the market scenario, they have to change their internal governance norms and make it more robust and more sound. Now, we see that in the market, under market forces, we spoke about from an investor point of view. We see that whenever an investor comes, he'll only think about a short-term gain from the company, right? If I'm putting like $1,000 in the company, I want it to be $2,000 as soon as possible. But in India, it gives a very different scenario. It's different position, because in India, most of the companies are promoters intensive company. You see, like for example, Reliance Industries, where I think the Ambani family is holding the most maximum number of shares. You see Kotak Group, they're the Rahija Group for that matter, Birlas, All these are still promoter intensive companies. Though the investors do put money, but there's always a kind of a pull and push among these two group of shareholders in the company, and you see that that's also becomes very important, because you see the moment there is a conflict, the corporate governance norms come into picture. And uh, in this case also, of companies of shareholders of the same company having two distinct features, there also is a conflict, and the governance norms always gives a clarity that how to go about it and how to solve this conflict. Now, there are other points of the market forces are corporate governance scorecard. These are rating agencies, list all they keep the equity R&D wings of different companies, investment advisors. They keep on coming with their report, and these reports are considered seriously now by the investors before they go ahead and invest in the company. And therefore, again, these market forces are the important role to force the company, or may say to inspire the company to adhere to the corporate governance norms. Other than institutional global norms, under institutional global norms, as the companies are going wider and wider, bigger and bigger, and more, sophisticated investors are coming. Sophisticated MNCs are interested to, make some joint ventures with them. Therefore, they had to adhere to the global norms of corporate governance. And therefore, we see that apart from regulatory norms, these factors are also important, and and I know and obliges the company to be more sensitive about the corporate governance. The next is market image, social media, hyperactivism, journalism. You see, the journalist, when especially when you're advising a company or working for as a company as the in-house, you also need to take care of this market image, social media, hyperactivism. The business journalists who keep on writing articles about a company, and they don't really miss out on any kind of smoke of fraud. If they sense it, and therefore you have to be really sensitive about those and take care of them. And that is only possible if you have a strong internal control and internal institutional governance norms. Next is voluntary guidelines. The companies can always impose voluntarily guidelines for their own corporate governance. Recently, MCA has come, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs 19 came up with national guidelines for responsible business conduct. That again goes on in the lines of sustainable development goals of the UN, and it comes with those 9 principles. And any company can very well go ahead and adopt these guidelines. We see the Tata, because I have worked in a couple of matters for Tata. They have a very strong internal governance now. In fact, they have a very strong committee for ethics and department for ethics, which keeps on working to achieve these strong corporate governance norms, and become, and they in fact they are ideal for the a lot of companies, inspire them to follow their path. Now, what is also important is to understand uh, what are the building blocks of corporate governance norms. Now, and that's very unique to India. Now, in corporate governance norms, as I explained to you, there are different people as the company goes bigger and bigger. There are different people who are dealing with the company, and therefore, at the first point is always the shareholder. The next is the board. Thirdly is the management. Fourthly are the other stakeholders. Now, shareholder is the fundamental. Now, the shareholder is ideally the basic, no, uh, is kind of like a comes at the bottom of the company, and they exercise their rights and perform their duty by way of voting in the EGM or the EGMs. EGMs are the annual general meeting, and the EGM is the extraordinary general meeting. Now, and just to give you an analogy and example, this shareholder function just like we function when we go and vote in the elections of this country, right? The whole concept is very democratic, and it comes from Companies Act and the rules therein. On some matters, you need ordinary resolutions where only 51% of votes are enough, where there are some matters where shareholder resolutions are important. Now, why these shareholder is a governing block in a of a corporate governance in a company. Now, as I told you, corporate governance is all about balancing the goals of different entities in a company, right? Now, or in other way, is to ensure that there are appropriate checks and balances. Now, in this case, we try to understand that how a shareholder can very well act as a check over the other components of a company. Now, as I told you, shareholder is the owner of the company in a advanced business example, and the company in fact is run by the board of directors. Now, thirdly, the board of directors are hardly meet, 3 or 4. They are required to meet at least 4 times in a year, and generally, what we see in most of the companies, they meet on 4 to 8 times in a year. Therefore, the board of directors are like a what you call the cabinet of ministers in a union government, right? And the cabinet ministers are the main people who are the cabinet holding the cabinet positions, and then they individually run their own departments through the IS officers, right? Similarly, in the company, very much similar to it, shareholder are like the people of this country. The board is the cabinet, the management, the departments, and the secretaries and the IS officers. This is how largely a company can be understood, that how it's run, right? And as we see in the constitutional law, all these different wings of people choosing them, prime minister and the minister making policy and management implementing them. Similarly, shareholder board and management functions a very similar manner. Now, these three components are also important to ensure there is appropriate check and balance. Now, as we see, when a shareholder votes, now shareholder can very well vote for appointment or removal of a director, right? Therefore, ultimately, the appointment and choosing or firing of a director is in the hands of the shareholder. Therefore, in this manner, shareholder can very well use or their power to maintain check over the board of directors. And whenever a director is not following the object of the company, or is not is been found in a fraudulent practice, can very well be removed from the company. The other examples are the special resolutions where the shareholders vote for like matters like amendments in the memorandum of association or article of association, whenever they have to approve a related party transaction, or whenever they have to approve mergers and acquisitions, right? Now, in those situations where the structure of the company is changing, in such scenario also the shareholders have the power, right? Now, in those cases, the threshold is bigger, and not only special approval, but 3/4 majority is required. Now, you see how shareholders have been given power in these cases by our regulatory norms to ensure that they have proper tools in their hands, so that whenever it's required, they can maintain checks and balances over the board of directors and also in the structure of the company. Now, we also see, especially in India, as I told you, the companies are largely into promoter intensive companies. In those cases, the promoters have a high have a high role in the hierarchy of the company, and they can very well influence the decisions of the company, be it operating decisions or the governance decisions. And therefore, you see lots of pictures in the Companies Act, and also under other specific laws like PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, RBI or so on and so forth, they're those people who are officers in default, who are officers of the company, or who can influence the company decisions, are made liable for any kind of violations of their specific laws. Now, in these Indian companies cases where the promoters have a high, have a high stage in their hierarchy, and they do very well can influence their, their wills upon the decision of the company. Those situations also, these promoters are made liable. So you see, what I'm trying to explain is that shareholder can very well maintain a check over the board of directors, right? By using their voting powers. At the same time, laws also ensures that whenever something go wrong happens, some fraud is being detected. In such situation, laws also has a power to do a reverse test and see that whether only the board of directors or the person who was officer was in default, or whether it goes ahead and see with the shareholder in Indian cases which are promoted, he will be punished appropriately as per the act. Therefore, check and balance whole series circle is completed. The second building block of the corporate governance is board of directors. Now, as I told you, in a advanced business example where the companies are are run by more sophisticated and professionals. In those situations, we see that shareholders take a backstage and they only meet for their annual general meeting or extraordinary general meeting, and they gave most of the powers in the board of directors. So you will see in this particular slide that board of directors are always at the epicenter, because they, as I told you, from example of like a Indian government, board of directors are like the cabinet ministers, and they are answerable to everyone, which is shareholder, customer, creditor, compliance under various laws for default, management, employees, the vendors. I mean, all the stakeholders. Example which we spoke earlier about. All these are needs to be managed and by the board directors. The board directors come at the epicenter of it, and therefore board directors are a very important block in a company. Now, the moment if you're an important block in the company, of course, you'll be important block in the corporate governance also. Now, that the regulatory norms require that the board of directors can always be categorized into three parts. The first part is executive director. The second part is non-executive director. The third part is the independent directors. Now, the law mandates that these directors of a different kind needs to be there. And one of the most prominent prime example of corporate governance is introduction of independent directors in the company, in the board. Now, earlier, when we talk about 60s or 70s, independent directors was not a adopted concept in the Companies Act. In fact, only after Satyam case, the whole independent director institution concept was adopted in the Companies Act. And now in the new Companies Act 2013, independent directors find a very important role, and also under SEBI LODR, because the whole idea is that since the BOD, the board of directors, is such an important element in the company, therefore there are few people who are independent and of higher integrity should always be on the board of director, so that appropriate check and balance can be maintained. Now, board can also form committees as I told you, that board hardly meets for like 4 to 5 times in a year. So therefore, the Companies Act allows them to have form some committees, delegate the powers of the board to these committees, and take actions. So Companies Act right now provides for audit committee, nomination and remuneration committee, CSR committee, ethics committee, stakeholder relationship committee, and so on and so forth. So what it does, it delegates the power to these committees. The committees function, and board directors are supposed to ensure that there is appropriate check and balance over these committees. As we discussed, next is the next building block of the company is a management. Now, a board director and management can always be just like a cabinet minister and the IS officers or under different secretaries. They are in a way a same. Similarly, in the company also, we see that most of the time the board director and management are same. But in an advanced business model where the company is really big, the company do appoints and CEOs, CEOs, CFOs, and their company secretaries. Now these come under the bracket of management, and in Companies Act they are called key managerial personnel. Now these KMPs are involved into the day-to-day business activity of the company, right? Now they have a wide power because since they are involved under the involved in the day-to-day workings of the company, so they have wide they work on a very wide scale and also on a very horizontally also in a very in-depth scale. Now therefore the corporate governance norms are important for these management to be regulated. Now these KMPs needs to be regulated. They are regulated by two ways. Firstly, they are checks and balances are ensured over them by board of directors. Secondly, they are also the law also mandates certain duties and requirements, obligations on these KMPs, so that their proper check and balances are maintained. Now, in fact, the market is also very sensitive to it. Whenever there is a change in the KMP of a company, the early DR regulations mandates that you do go ahead and make a disclosure. Now, the other way of also having a check over the management is having your audits, periodic audits. Now, Companies Act, especially the SEBI, is very, very sensitive toward these audits, right? Because these are audits are the independent verification and test of the working of the company. So they can be financial audit, they can be environmental audit, they can be legal audit, they can be forensic audit, and these are the tools to ensure that independent verifications are done and reports come, and the reports are do come out in the public, especially for listed companies. And therefore the investors are the people who are the stakeholders of the company, who are not involved in the day-to-day affairs of the company, can very well have a good idea and a good sense about the company's governance and company's day-to-day activities. Now the independence at one point in time was really questioned because, but now I understand the MCA and SEBI both are very sensitive about it, and they really want that these independent people, just like our independent director example in the board, here these auditors in the example of management for the block, they have started to play a very important role so that an independent test a verification can be done from time to time, and any kind of fraud, or for example any kind of mishandling in the company's business can be checked at early as possible and can be solved as early as possible, so that matters like ICICI Bank matter or Satyam for that matter, or recently ILFS and JP, these things don't come out in public because ultimately it harms the companies, it harms the stakeholders, it harms the sectors and harms the industries also, right? So that's really important. There are other stakeholders also which are which deal with the company, as I told you, like creditors. For example, these creditors are very important stakeholder, and recently insolvency bankruptcy court is one of a norm which gives a lot of power to these creditors, and these creditors can very well those creators can very well take their complaints and take the grievances under the IBC, and therefore the company management and the board needs to be really sensitive about the insolvency bankruptcy code. Other examples are employees. Now, employees under the Companies Act, sadly, there is no any uh, specific regulation which governs the employees from a corporate governance perspective. But we see that we have labor laws also, and also we see under the IBC, for example, whenever company is liquidated, the employees are come at the first rank, and therefore all the monies need to be paid to the employees. Therefore, they are a very important stakeholder. The environment and the community, I think they are the best example under the Companies Act is to read about the CSR, the Corporate Social Responsibility, Section 135 Companies Act. I mean, it gives obliges the company to to spend towards the community and the environment they are functioning. In fact, from the past 2 years, and what I can tell you from our own practice experience, that a lot of companies have received notices, and I've been asked that why, and asked to explain that why their CSR spendings have not met the legal requirement, and they have been asked to either comply with it or to explain to the ministry. Now, in fact, the SEBI is more sensitive about it, sensitive towards these stakeholders. The LODR mandates the certain companies to have a grievance register mechanism internally, and whoever has as a stakeholder has a problem with the company very well raise the grievance, and the company is supposed to have to conduct appropriate inquiries or hearings and make sure that they come up with the appropriate report and inform the stock exchange. Now, the other way of having a check and balance by the other stakeholders is having the disclosures, right? So under the SEBI LODR and also under the SEBI, the company law and the SEBI mandates that the companies come up with their appropriate disclosures. Now, these disclosures can be accessed on the stock exchange websites for each company, and also for non-listed companies, anyone can pay the 100 rupees fee and access these records from the MC website. So these two methods are also important so that the companies are told to come up with their disclosures, and the stakeholders involved. Stakeholders anyone who can get affected by the company can have access to the information, and not even access to information, timely access to information, so that they can take appropriate decisions. And therefore, this is also very important from a corporate governance norms perspective. Now, customers have also become very important stakeholder for a company. In fact, in couple of cases, the courts have given they have given damages. They have been asked the company to pay to these customers for any fraudulent cases. In fact, recently, I think 3 or 4 days ago, Consumer Act, new acts, so 18, I guess, or 19 new sections were notified. Now, there the product liability and the class action suits are going to be really important, and the companies from a governance norms perspective internally needs to always keep these sections all in the mind. Now, since we're talking about corporate governance norms in this COVID-19 pandemic situation, it's also important to understand that how the corporate governance norms have played a very important role under the crisis management. Now, especially in these times where nothing is ordinary course of business, we have seen that most of the sensitive boards have have taken a very important role internally to maintain a proper balance inside the company. They have in like earlier times they hardly used to meet 6 or 7 times in a year. Now they are meeting very often, so that they understand from the management what their concerns are, whether the employees are working in a safe environment or not, whether the customers are taken care of or not, whether the even the revenues have tanked down. Still, these norms ensure that when the ship is sinking, you do have a balanced approach to it. Now, the MCA has also responded towards it. They have permitted the through video conferencing to have their board meeting or the shareholders meeting, so that these virtual courses can also uh, come into picture, and therefore they give a very balanced approach towards meeting the needs in this COVID-19 impact. What I also have seen in the recently in couple of cases, because of the virtual courts in the shareholders are meeting, so they virtually anyone can, if a shareholder can go attend these meetings, the shareholder activism, the shareholders, small, they have a very minute shareholding. If something is, fraudulent case or something which, from a company's internal, business and governance perspective comes into their knowledge, they are not hesitating to highlight it. Now, it's also very good to have, to have these people in the company, because it ensures, of course, that you have a good check and balance over these units, these building blocks of the company. Now, I would lastly, I would just want to end with what are the role of the lawyers in this for this corporate governance. Now, when we work at as a law firm, our colleagues are working as an in-house counsel, we have a very difficult role to play, especially when we give legal opinions to these companies, especially in those situations where there is a conflict of from management versus board versus shareholder, and a balancing act is required. Especially if you have an in-house lawyer working with the company, then you have to see the problem from very different lenses, and to understand that what kind of check and balance the company norms and regulatory norms provided, and also what should be a prudent practice as per the internal guidelines of the company. And then you have to guide the company and the management or the people who are at the board to take right decisions. Now, we have also important role to give strategic advices to the management or to the board, especially with the independent directors. As I told you, independent directors are very important right now, and a lot of norms and laws have been enacted to take care, give the guidelines to them, and therefore all these independent directors keep on coming to us as lawyers, as law firms, to take advice that what they should do in on those certain cases as they are handling. And as a lawyer, you need to give them the best advice, or give them legal opinions. Now, that is only possible if you have a good update on the, of course, apart from the the companies acting the SEBI and everything else, the norms. You have to also have a good need to have a good impact over the judicial pronouncement, and the SEBI and RBI keeps on they keep on coming with their circulars, their notifications, their working papers, and I think those are very important to to be updated with, so that you can will be in a better position to answer to the the queries which you come up with. Now, we also play a very important role to with the compliances of to ensure that the company is compliant. Most of the cases we do have the company secretaries of the company who we engage with, but what we have seen that the company secretaries do face some problems whenever a kind of interpretation is required, or whenever there is a conflict situation is required, and therefore as a lawyer you are very actively involved to deal with those scenarios. We have also been in a couple of matters we have been told to to make a policy, or to give an opinion on the material information. As I told you, for example, disclosures, right? So under disclosures, we don't need to just disclose everything. The Companies Act, or in fact the SEBI also, LODR also mandates us to only give material information, disclose material information. Now, in such scenarios where there is a confusion whether something is material or not material, though the test has been given in the SEBI LODR, I think in regulation 30 or 29, but at the same time, we are actively involved in making policies basis those norms, or do a test on case to case basis where something is material or not. I think that's it from on my side. I think the house can is open for questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for the informative session. I request you now to please address some of the questions of the participants. So, for the first question, can you analyze in brief the development of working of SEBI guidelines on corporate governance?
Now, so if the SEBI, is a primarily not a very old organization, right? In 1990s, I think the SEBI first came into picture, and before that, also most of the companies and the sectors in India, the listed companies were not functioning, right? And they were closed economy. Now, as the market grew, as the FEMA and SEBI came into picture, um, the first, I think, the law norm was the clause 49 of the listing agreement. Whenever a company needs to list their shares to a stock exchange, they go and enter into a contract, which is called a listing agreement. Now, the first, point where the corporate governance started under the SEBI was this clause 49 of these listing agreements. Now, these listing agreements are basically a private contracts between the company and the stock exchanges, and these under these agreements the listed companies were required to have to give appropriate disclosures from time to time to these stock exchanges. Now the only problem was that it didn't give much teeth to SEBI, and therefore in 2015 SEBI came up with their LODR guidelines, and that was the most important in my mind, was the regulation which paved way for corporate governance in listed companies.
Thank you for answering the question, sir. For the second question we have is, please can you discuss the ways in which the principles of ethics in observing corporate governance can be balanced with profit-making intentions of companies?
Yeah, so that's a very important question, and this is as I told you with respect to the building blocks, right? Now, at one point of time, there is a shareholder which wants or investor which want maximum profit from the company. At the same time, you have your internal governance also. Now, balancing them is a very important task, and therefore, lots of these international organizations, forums keep on coming up with these guidelines. Now, let me tell you, it's a very difficult scenario for India right now. The Indian market is not really that much sophisticated, where where the maximizing the profit can be taken into one corner, because you see in economy Indian companies are still right now at a developing stage. Therefore, you will always see that the balance is tilting towards one or the other. Now, at lots of time, these regulators and the government had to come and intervene for the ethics. Now, as a lawyer, when you work with these companies as an in-house counsel or as a law firm and you advise them, now there you have to play a very important role, along with the other management of the company, whether you need to have a better ethics or better maximum profit. Now, as I told you, in this example, that whenever in Indian companies, most of the promoters always look for a long-term approach, because they have started the company and their whole family is dependent on the company, and they want to have a long-term approach from the company. But all these small investors, the private equity investors, have a very small scale goal in the company, and they want to get maximum profit in those 3 to 5 years of the time. And therefore, this power struggles and balance keeps on tilting from each other, right? And but at the same time, as I told you, the benefit of having a better corporate governance, ethics for that matter, in the long term is very important, and it has given results to a lot of companies from an empirical study that has given lots of benefit and given a good reputation. In the long term, the shareholders which are want to maximize their profit right now, if they wait, they, as I explained it to you, they get an enhanced share value they will get a premium to their the shares which they are holding if they allow the company, the management to have a robust ethics in the inside the company. But again, having said that, the company, the Indian market and economy is a very primitive stage right now as compared to the other countries. We have just opened our economy in 1990s. We have seen the startups coming in 2011 and 12s. Lots of Indian companies are run by foreign monies, unfortunately. Therefore, this power struggle will keep on happening, and we will see that gradually, maybe next 15 to 20 years, we'll have a better corporate governance, or as is you mentioned, ethics internally in the company, where the companies will have a will again start coming in these global ranks of Forbes and all. Unfortunately, I think last year we have only three companies from India in those lists. So of course, there's a whole big road to travel. But having said that, we need to understand also that Indian economy is not that sophisticated.
Thank you, sir. Third question is, can you discuss the Tata Mystery controversy and relate it to the role of corporate governance in a company?
Thank you for the question. I mean, that's a very important, mm, you know, uh, case right now to study, to read upon, and have a to keep yourself updated about it. Now, rather than going much into the matter, the most important from a lawyer, from a law student, is to understand that how this operation and mismanagement concept, which we see just like a chapter in the company, was first time used in such a big scenario. Now, now as a from a corporate governance perspective, it's not largely that much important from the lens of a management, but the moment we'll see from the lens of a shareholder is very important, because it's an inter-shareholder dispute, right? Now, apart from this inter-shareholder dispute, what was it happened in this case was that Mr. Mistry, also being as a shareholder of the company Tata Group, was also actively involved in the management. He was holding the chairman position of the company, and therefore we see that how board have directors have in the name of asking for checks, allegedly have removed Mr. Mistry from the management. Now, we have to yet to see that what Supreme Court ultimately lays down. But the way NCLAT has given the decision, NCLAT has completely missed out in giving a proper guideline for as a from a presidential value perspective to other companies, that what how and what how these cases can be handled. But having said that, from a inter-shareholder dispute, this is one of the most important case, and therefore the operation and mismanagement norms under the Companies Act will be are no lovely to see, and know how they have how they are played out right now in this case.
So the last question is the Indian model of corporate governance fruitful in current context? Can you please highlight some prominent solutions that may be implemented to bring a productive, ethical, and transparent corporate governance?
Now, I am a very firm believer of the and a huge fan of Companies Act on this point. Now 2013 Companies Act has taken the whole threshold of company corporate governance from from level maybe like J to level A, right? It has we have seen a huge overturn of especially the company administration and the way the companies are have been behaving, the norms of like the prospectus and allotment rules section, the way the companies are, have to maintain the independent directors, um, the way the company have have to deal with their auditors. I think the Indian way of corporate governance, the Indian model, is superb. Is superb. What has really happened right now is we need to understand and appreciate that all these norms have their teething troubles, and especially in the past 2 3 years, especially once the IBC came into picture, and lots of lots of I remember, I think 2018 significant beneficial ownership rules came. Now these mandated the company to identify their beneficial owners and and make a disclosure so that the instance of fraud or money laundering doesn't happen. So for me, I think the kind of model the Companies Act gives is best suited for India. Why? Because India, we have to also understand the Indian model of business, Indian model of company is still right now also is promoter driven. Any company you pick up right now into the top 20 and 50 of Sensex or Nifty, you will see that like all these companies are run by a promoter group or promoter family, right? And as we see the business more no the promoter driven model of business moves from promoters to professionally managed companies, like for example your Airbnb and or Amazon of the world, or Googles of the world, we see that our norms and our model will also change. But right now, my firm belief and my whole bet towards is the Indian model of corporate governance, because it's well suited towards towards the Indian model of business. In fact, at a lot of places, the industry, if you speak to people who are working in the industry and who are running running the day-to-day as a company, they think that there's a lot of compliances with the company, and they have to do on a very daily basis. And the ministries has keeps on coming, new compliances. But they have to also, be we're also fortunate to have this whole technological advancement, whole virtual meetings, virtual filings, everything to our disposal, which has also made life easier and ensure that companies can do their compliances more swiftly and fastly. I'm still teething trouble, but I still have my bet on the Indian model of corporate governance and Companies Act specifically, rather than going outside the world and borrowing something from them, because it suits the Indian model of business also.
Thank you, sir. Before I ask you the other question, I want to make a small announcement that the attendance is already marked, and the feedback form will be shared to you via mail. So please mention that. Also, then for the next question, I want to ask, do you think that the present amended method of inducting independent directors be effective in terms of improving corporate governance?
Uh, I mean, they came up with a norm. I mean, and the intention is perfectly. I mean, I don't doubt that. But as I told you, whenever a norm is made, whenever a law is made, a regulation is made, I mean, the person who is making the law needs to always be aware about the present situations in the business. I mean, you want someone to give, have a high integrity and have a high professional acumen to be independent director. But do you have people to be, in the market who are having those qualities? I mean, do you think that someone can are they readily available of such a high repute and high professionals? This is going to be a very difficult task to achieve, because in the current scenario, and let me tell you honestly, people are not ready to become independent directors, especially after the JP matter, where the independent directors were asked not to sell their own assets. Okay, imagine someone who's an independent director in the company, right, who's having the performing the independent duties, and their personal assets were freezed by the by the courts. Now, I understand the duties and the code of ethics for the independent directors are at a very high threshold, because they have to, again, as I told you, have to play a very important role as an independent body to analyze the actions of the board. But at the same time, you cannot really, overdo it. And I clearly think that these new norms are the overdoing of things, rather than going and making the life easier of the whole model of ease of doing business. You have made it more difficult. We get to see how the market responds, because most of the companies were required to have their independent directors appointed maybe in this current AGM or maybe next couple of years, because most of these directors are appointed for 5-year term. So when their terms are ended, then when the companies have to find a new director and appoint a new director, then I'm sure they're gonna face challenge. But Since again, having said that we do have 3 to 5 years, then maybe we may prepare ourselves for these challenge also. So, but clearly right now it's a overdue. It was not required that much. It was, I think, more for like they wanted to fix the scenario, especially after the JP and the ILFNS and whole IBC and CLT dispute, Maharashtra PMC and all of the cases.
Thank you, sir. That's it for the questions. And thank you so much for sharing the knowledge with us. And I
Yeah.
think we should wrap it then.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.